Hey, what is up, you guys? It is Andy and Kat, and we are again back with the ERP series that we have embarked on. And today I'm actually going to be interviewing our very own Andy, functional consultant, very seasoned functional consultant in ERP. And of course, if we're going to include if we're going to do a series on ERP, we obviously have to include Andy. He gives a lot. He's been in the industry for, oh God, I can't even. I'm going to be dating you, but like, let's say just 20 plus years.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's 25 years. It was 25 years as a consultant this spring. So, yeah, a long time.
Wow. 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 Andy has primarily worked with the implementation of ERP, particularly Oracle ERP. And as the evolution of Oracle technology has, come about, he's worked on, gosh, like 20 years worth of evolution of Oracle. But really, like when we talk about implementing Oracle, there's so many different areas and aspects that belong to this area, right? And so your specific area, like where you shine, is that you handhold the organization, the business leaders in that organization to understand how they do business and how to fit that to fit Oracle and the technology, perhaps all the integrations having to do with Oracle into the business so that it can best support the business today and have it scale up. Would that be accurate?
It is, yeah. Yes. And what I focus on primarily is project-centric companies. So companies who are in engineering, oil and gas, utility firms, construction, companies that really operate in a project focused mindset. So and what I do is
Right.
I focus, yeah, on making sure that those needs are met when they're doing an Oracle implementation and putting in a new ERP and making sure that their primary business and all of the support steps are handled.
Right. And one of your superpowers, of which you have many, is that you're also a designated accountant. So you
Yes,
understand the finance aspects and the manager, like the business leadership aspects, as well as the tactical, let's set up the organization so that you can deliver your service in projects, like in across projects, right?
that's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, but the one thing I really like about what I do, but a lot of the Oracle applications have this, and a lot of the ERPs have this, anyways. But is really being able to bridge the accounting skills with the actual business functions, because accounting is, of course, important because it's part of the financial statements, and it's what's being tracked. But really, it's about all the activity that's going on in the company that I really really enjoy, um, you know, making sure that meets the needs when they're putting in a new system. So I'm trying to bridge
Right.
those accounting skills with the other business processes.
Right, right. Okay, so I mean, there's lots of different ways we can take this, and obviously this is going to be the first of perhaps many conversations should you be game.
Yeah.
But just before we came on air, we had discussed that perhaps, we should start with what are some success factors or like some, X factors that you have encountered to ensure that people who are going through or thinking about going through an ERP implementation, or perhaps in the middle of it, can consider to ensure that their path is good.
Right. Yeah. And so I think one of the big things with the any sort of project or any sort of implementation, and I think this goes for really any endeavor somebody takes on, any sort of objective somebody wants to take on, is just making sure you want to be successful. And there's a lot of things that happen. So one of the big things, and this may sound so obvious, but it's first of all identifying what success looks like. And I think that when when somebody undertakes a project of any nature, but we're talking primarily here ERP implementations, it's really looking and saying, what does success look like throughout the engagement and once we're done. Now, the common statement is always on time, on budget, within scope. The challenge with that is that that's sort of like telling somebody, asking somebody, how do I make money in the stock market? And they say,
Yeah.
buy low, sell high. It's so obvious that, but that's really often not the really what success looks like. The reason being is that, let's say we're on time, on budget, within scope, but we have people who quit at the end of the project. We've got people who are sick. They've got weeks of bank time that they're taking off. They might have relationship problems. They might be going through mental health issues from the stress through a project. That's probably not a definition of success. So if we were to say,
No.
okay, you hit your budget, you met your scope, you hit your timeline, but you don't have anybody to support the system, you'd say, well, that's not really a definition of success. So you really want to, I think, first off, is really clearly define what success looks like, is early, in the engagement, before you really take it on, is really important. But it can be just even throughout the project, if you're engaged in something, is to say what does success look like, and
Right.
put some definition around that.
So okay, so how early are we talking about? Are we talking about in the the RFP process, because I've seen RFPs that are ridiculously generic. Like people don't
Yes.
actually know what they want, and it's not to say that they're, not thinking about it or not being diligent about what they want. It's just that they don't know what success really ought to look like. Or are you referring to the success at the beginning of the project? We've selected the system that we're going to implement, and what are those key metrics of success? What do those look like? Like which area are you sort of folk referring to?
I would say as early on as possible. So during the RFP process, I would say that they should identify the success.
Mm.
But when you go to kick off the project, I think that's really important. Like I've seen companies who kick off a project and they'll say, nobody's going to work weekends, right? We don't make our people work weekends. And then 6 months into the project, they need their people to work weekends because there's too much work. And I've seen other
Right.
projects where day one, people are working till 11 o'clock at night, right? They're sending people home with work on the weekends, and you're going, this isn't sustainable, right? You can't go through a year and a half long project. You can't even go through a 6 week project with people working, you know,
No.
12, 14 hours a day and 6 days a week. It's just not something that is sustainable. So I think
Right.
as early upfront as possible is really important. And then looking at that success and measuring that, once when the project is actually going on. I think that one way of actually, like, what tends to happen a lot when people are looking at success and they're saying, okay, what does success look like? Typically, it's very vague and ambiguous statements. One one exercise that actually really works, and actually works in other areas of our life, but it works on projects, is to take the opposite view and say, how can we ensure that this thing is a failure? So let's list all of the steps we can do to make sure this is a failure. So what is it, right? Miss deadlines, don't attend meetings, don't come prepared, don't speak to each other, fight with each other, do a laundry list of everything. And the crazy thing is, when you make that list, there could be hundreds of things on that list because everybody knows what failure looks like. And we don't want to get into that negative set, but when we get that long list of things that we know we can make sure that we sink the ship, then we take the opposite and we say, okay, just do the opposite of that. Right now, here's our list of positive things that we say, if we do these things, we're probably 80-90% there. Right. And
That's amazing.
so that's an approach of actually, building that list. Because, yeah, what tends to happen is, with success, we end up saying, it's a lot of, oh, communicate. Okay, but what is communicate,
Yeah.
right? So, but if we know fighting with each other or missing deadlines, or it's a lot more. Um,
Tangible.
yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. So
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. So have you actually like this is a great idea and you're right. You can apply it to any area of your life as like the contrasting exercise, right? And I love how, especially when you're advocating to put it at the very beginning as early as possible in the project, like that's a really great icebreaker to, sort of get your team to start gelling together, right? Brilliant. I love it. I love it. So, okay, so then you've got, the exercise, the contrasting exercise to identify the what. And one of my next questions was, well, how are you going to, like, how do you get your people to define success? And I think you've really hit it on the mark. So now that you've defined what success or what you don't want, and then obviously, you're setting goals as to what you do want now because it's clear and tangible, what would be that next step?
yeah, I think the next thing is um, everybody understanding the mission. And when I say that, almost every project has a mission statement, and everybody reads it. But when I say what the mission is, it's really understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it, and the details around it. I think what tends to happen with a lot of mission statements is they are sort of light and fluffy, and they use all of the key words to make everybody feel good. And but I'll use an example. I've done a number of road trips, like let's say 6, 7, 8 hour drives with my family. And when we do those drives, when what I'll make sure is leading up to when we want to leave, everybody's clear on what we're doing. So if the intent is to get out at 8 a.m., that's I'll make everybody understand, hey, we want to be in the car pulling out of the driveway at 8 a.m. So this is what I expect from everybody. I'll tell them we're not going to eat breakfast for the first hour and a half, right? We're not going to stop for food, right? And I lay out exactly what we're going to do. The reason for that is that everybody understands what we're doing and why. They can prepare. I also tell them if you don't eat breakfast before we leave, that's on you, right? We're not pulling out of the driveway and 15 minutes after we leave, we're going to pull over and go to the bathroom, right? We need to move this thing along. And I think what happens with a lot of projects is that we undertake these engagements, and it maybe a year, it could be longer, and people start to lose focus on what we're doing and why. We know we're putting in a ERP, but why are we doing it, right? What were the
Hmm.
drivers? And because
Yeah.
and people need to be reminded that, and when I use that analogy of the drive, I remind everybody we'll stop to get something to eat, and it's okay, guys. We're going to leave in 45 minutes. The intent is that we want to get to our destination at a particular time. Somebody can turn a 5 or 6 hour car ride into a 14-hour destination by veering off track, being distracted, leaving late, having to stop frequently. Like there's a lot of things that can happen that can make things a lot more uncomfortable for the ride. And anybody who knows me knows I'm not a control freak in any way. Some of that is actually to make sure that I'm actually on track. But that's, I think, a very important thing is that people understand the mission. And when I say that, it's not just the mission statement. It's really understanding what we're doing and why, and having that buy-in, and reminding people along the way, what we're doing, and what are the reasons we're actually even taking this thing on.
That's amazing, actually. Okay, so in all of the projects that I've been on, I don't necessarily think that any of them really had a project mission statement. Like the organization has this beautifully crafted organization mission statement, but I think that's actually a missed step in most of any projects. People just, either the leadership or the project leaders just assume that everybody sort of knows that, well, obviously the mission statement would be to put in this ERP, but you're absolutely right in like it number one, setting up that mission statement and having everybody on the same page is I liken it to steering, getting everybody to row in the same direction, right? And then more granular to that, which is what you had referred to, is that um, it sets the expectation at a more granular level for what people need to do in their own roles, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's take this like more tactically. So like what happens? Like what what does it look like? Do you bring people in a get together, like a project kickoff, and or do you have um posters up in the project room so that people can be reminded, or do you have like what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the big thing I think is first of all planning that out. I think of an analogy. One analogy I think about is when the U.S. Marines went to go capture Bin Laden. Right? They had a very clear mission. They wanted to go capture Bin Laden. It wasn't that if they saw other things along the way, they weren't going to do it. And if we look at that mission, one helicopter actually crashed, and they had to go pick people up. So they actually had to now do other things. They had to actually destroy that helicopter that was left so that the technology couldn't be used and re-engineered. But once they actually went into Bin Laden's compound, they ended up finding equipment. They found computers. And so now what happened was the mission changed also from capturing Bin Laden to getting this material. Now, these are highly trained individuals, right, who also have very clear communication with their supervisors, their commanders, who said, okay, now this is what you're going to do. You're going to take those computers and we're going to take the extra time to do that. That decision was made. They can make that decision of the cost of it. Typically, soldiers do what they're supposed to do. They're given an order and they go and do it. But they fully understand the mission. I think one of the reasons why the mission statements from a lot of organizations fail, and times have changed from when I started in consulting, but back when I started and through a lot of my career, a lot of companies would just say, look, we're telling you to do it, go do it. Right. The employees should just do what we tell them to do. You're told to go to that meeting, go do it. You're told to go gather that information, go do it. You don't need to know why. You don't need to know what the bigger um, uh,
Picture
role
is.
is, the bigger
Hmm.
picture. Just go and do what we ask you to do. People are better. You get better information, you get better buy-in, you get better energy when people buy in. So I think one of the things is first of all looking and saying, why are we doing this? So we're putting in a new ERP system for what? To replace an old one because it's antiquated, or it doesn't meet our needs, or we've outgrown it, or are we doing it because we need better reporting? Are we going to go public? And so therefore, because we're going to go public, we need to have a solid ERP system to provide
Mm,
and make sure that what are the drivers around what we're doing.
yeah.
And now some of the stuff may not be able to share. You may not be able to say, hey, we're going to go public in 3 years, and you can't make that known. But it's
No,
about
right,
sharing the information that you can. And so I think
right.
really focusing on why we're doing it, what the end objective is, and then building that out. And then I think then reminding people with those statements, and it possibly could be every week reminding people, hey, this is why we're doing it. Could be like you said, posters and things like that. I'm not a light and fluffy guy, like, about that kind of stuff, but I do know, like, projects fail and they veer off track when people don't know what they're doing and why they're supposed to be doing it. I think
Hmm.
that's really when people start to get really distracted and confused. And now they're doing stuff, but is it feeding into the bigger purpose? That's always questionable. So
Right. That's interesting. That's a very tangible way to look at sorry, not tangible is the wrong word for it. It's like it's setting the attitude in the project to and then ensuring that people are moving in that same direction, right? And so the other day we were talking to Fred about organizational change management, and these same themes keep recurring. And so, from the organizational change management point of view, the audience is to obviously get all the folks in your organization to move to the new system and get buy-in from them, so that they're doing these future state processes that hopefully, I mean, the point of it is to make the organization more efficient and more streamlined. But the part that is relevant is that it's you know, for the organization, yes, but for the project team, most importantly, absolutely, they need to be moving in the same direction, and understand, they need to understand what their expectations are,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So there's so many ways there's so many different paths that we can take from here, but in the spirit of time and
Mm.
what is one more thing that an a project team or project leaders can ensure are they're doing in order to have a successful implementation?
Yeah, I think there's one other one I think is people really, so if I'm speaking from the consultant's perspective, so your external resources
Hmm.
really understanding what the business does. And this may again
Ah,
sound so obvious, but I could tell you that there are consultants who go in and work for companies and they have no idea what that company does. And there are actually employees of companies who sometimes don't really know what the company really does. When you go, well, we produce, X, Y, and Z, but they don't really know the end customers and things like that. From the external resources, I think understanding what the company does, what their main business is. So again, like I work in the project space. And so, like, let's say if I'm working for a pipeline company, we know that their primary business is building pipelines, building and maintaining pipelines. Now they'll have secondary businesses. It might be financing, it might be construction, there might be other secondary businesses that they're actually running and relying on. But their primary business is building and maintaining pipelines. Uh, Anybody who comes in, anybody internal or external, needs to understand that's the primary business, and everything we're doing is to support that business. Um, I'll use another analogy, or another example. Amazon, right? Amazon's two primary businesses, really, their business functions that are the key to their business is their order management, their order entry, which is their website primarily, and their order fulfillment. So that's their two biggest things. So they would have all of their business functions supporting that. Now, what does that look like on a day to day and a tactical perspective? Well, that's really where all of the business steps come to play. But I think but it's really important during a project or an ERP is that everybody understands what the business actually does.
does.
And again, it seems so straightforward, like, okay, well, why wouldn't we know what we do? Well, I've seen people arguing that, a support department, right, should take precedence over the main department that's providing the services, or that is the main product that's being built. It doesn't mean that company, that department isn't important, but optimize you optimize around your key business, the key thing that you're
Right.
doing that's driving revenue, that you're doing as a business. That's the thing you optimize around. And then the other parts are support departments, or now you're trying to do your best to support them, because those support functions, or those support applications, or those support business processes, the better those are, of course, the better it feeds into that key business. But really understanding what it is that we do. I'll give another quick example. Sears, right? Sears, that doesn't exist anymore. Simpson Sears, Sears and Roebuck. Their primary business was financing, right? That was their primary business. They made most of their money through financing.
Mm,
So most people would say, well, it was the retail side. Well, it was really the financing end. And if somebody was to go and work for Sears or do consulting for Sears, knowing that their primary business is finance, and the financing that they were earning from their credit cards would have helped them better support that business than thinking it's the retail end. And
that's interesting.
so, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is not at all what I had expected. Like when you said, you got to understand what business that your client is in. I, I would think, like most people would think, if you're helping an oil and gas company, well, they sell, oil and gas. But that's not what you're referring to. You're referring to the key elements of the business operation that brings in the most money. And that is truly the business that you're in. It's kind of like McDonald's is not really in the, I mean, they deliver fast food. That's not really the business that they're in. They're really in the real estate game.
That's right. Yes, that's right. 100%. And I think the better, and I'll talk, an external consultant, but this goes even for people, the employees or the internal resources for a company. The better someone understands that, and then the better someone understands the touch points of that key business function that is providing that key revenue. And if you're in a not-for-profit, it's the same thing. What actually do you do? A not-for-profit, it may be that grants, right? Getting out and getting grant money is their key part of their business. That's what survives. It may be getting donations. It may be providing a particular service. But knowing what it is that business survives on it, and what it optimizes for, and then knowing what those touch points are, the upstream and downstream. So who are they providing that service for as a customer? Who are they getting inputs from internal or external? It just makes that whole process better. And that really can separate, from a resource perspective, it separates the really good resources from the mediocre, but can really make the difference in a project, because it really focuses those resources on what they're supposed to be
On what
building.
actually matters.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I want to thank you so, so much. I mean, you and I talk often, but this has been really enlightening in that you have given, people three really clear objectives to ensure success when going on and either implementing an ERP in progress or thinking about an ERP, or like even, optimizing. And I mean, I feel like these are really universal lessons that people uh, can implement. So thank you again. Really appreciate your insight. And any final comments for,
One thing I always think about is, people always say that, life is it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I disagree with that statement. And I think a project is really much the same. And I disagree with it because I think life or a project is more like an 800-meter mid-distance sprint. You can't go for a light jog and finish. You've got to keep up the pace, but you're not sprinting, dead out of the gate. So I think a lot of it is just keeping up and moving forward and trying to move forward at a quick pace, but not a dead sprint.